For a conversation on how technology is redefining the future of art and humanity, please welcome playwright Ayoade Akhtar with Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic.
Nice to see all of you again. I mean that metaphorically because we can't see a thing. Yeah. There could be literally 0 people in this audience, and I wouldn't.
Sounds like more than 0.
That's AI.
Yeah. Okay.
That's literally some AI program.
Really good.
You know, it's amazing. Well, what interesting subject you have raised, so we should talk about it. So I'm very, very excited. My friend and spiritual guide Ayoade Akhtar is with us. One of America's, I'm going to say, top 3, maybe 5 playwrights.
It's funny because backstage you said 10. So
it's
upselling?
inflation.
You're upselling.
I'm upselling. Look, they're here. I got to keep them in the seat. You know, I got to keep them here. These imaginary people that I believe are out there. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner and an all-around brilliant commentator and analyst of our folkways and mores. We're going to talk about a subject that preoccupies both of us, and we've spent some time talking about the AI revolution. Ayoade is obviously the author most recently of McNeel, which is a huge play at the Lincoln Center Theater, Robert Downey Jr. in the title role. I think the play is prophetic. We'll find out in the fullness of time how prophetic it was. But let's start by asking the most basic question of all of someone who creates. Can an LLM right now do what you do?
Not yet.
When will it be able to do what you do?
I'm not sure. I mean, the changes even in the last year have been so remarkable that it's hard to. I have a friend who's in the audience, Daniel Kelman, one of the great international novels.
Here?
Yeah, he's here.
Oh,
here.
He's amazing.
And Daniel.
This is an amazing festival.
Daniel and I are constantly talking about this, and he prompted GPT to write a Daniel Kelman story. Uh-huh. And it came up with 2 versions, and he said, you know what? It wouldn't be my best, but they're not bad. So, I mean, that's a short story form, and I think sort of novels, it'll be more challenging with a novel. I think it's easier with scenes. It would be much harder with a full play or a screenplay. But, 2 years ago, my whole interest in all of this kind of was piqued by the fact that 2 years ago I had a friend who was running one of the big production companies in Hollywood and called me, used to be a McKinsey consultant, studied literature at Yale, then was running one of these companies, and said, I hired a guy a few months ago to figure out how to use an LLM to write a screenplay. We have a document we're circulating internally. It took him about 2 months to figure it out. Would you read it? This was April of 23. GPT had been live for 6 months. I read it and I was like, wow, this is hands down the most compelling script I've read in a long time. It's a 30-minute pilot. And it wasn't compelling in the sense that it was good, but it was compelling in the sense that it had my number the way that that phone has my number. I just keep looking for something on my phone that I don't even know what I'm looking for, but I keep checking it. And I was turning the pages with that strange reptilian compulsion. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do what it knows how to do on the page. So that kind of got me interested. But I still don't feel that the products, if I ask it to do something, I don't feel that it is, that last mile is not, it's not getting there in that last mile yet.
Do you think, based on your studies of AI and AGI, that it's getting there? Do you feel like we're getting closer to the point? I mean, I guess the question...
It's getting closer if the prompting is really sophisticated. If you give it, for example, that initial prompt can often be a kind of like set point for a decision tree. So if the initial prompt is something like, you think like a dramatic, or like a dramatist, you think in reversals and recognitions, you are mapping clear chains of action in which action is necessary and probable and follows. If you're very clear about the parameters, it'll start tuning to those qualities. And now everything I'm describing is what Aristotle describes as a great dramatist, or great drama, what comprises great drama. So I think, I'm learning more and more as I've been working with somebody sort of in the bowels of some of the LLMs, and I'm kind of watching him, prompting him. He inputs it within the sort of, the kind of all the coding stuff that I don't understand. And I'm seeing how I think prompting can advance its ability. But, it still hasn't been able. I mean, Sam Altman and Michael Lewis have this running thing. So Sam told Michael, will you write a biography of me? And Michael said, I'll do it if you get GPT to do it too, and we see who does it better. And Sam was like, well, not yet, because it's not going to be, you can't do it as good as you yet. And this is about a year ago. It's still not there. And we can talk about why, but.
Well, why?
Because I think there's two things. First, I think LLMs are solving for meaning within a system where they're trying to constantly close meaning. So you have a prompt, it's trying to answer your prompt, trying to get to the end of that process in every single prompt, every single response.
Right.
Dramatic thinking or storytelling is not about closing meaning over time, it's about opening meaning onto further.
Every decision leads to a decision.
Exactly. And that's a quality of experience, which is the second thing that I think LLMs don't have. Well, I mean, I know that they don't have it. They don't have experience. But that lack of experience is actually germane to how the language is operating. So simple example is I was having a long conversation with GPT a few months ago, and we were quibbling about this, this use of the word clarity, because it could not seem to understand that clarity was also a mode of consciousness which has a feeling of brightness and completeness. It couldn't understand the usage of clarity in that way. And it was sort of what began to help me understand.
It doesn't have that flash of, aha, like the LLM never says, oh, now I get it.
It doesn't have.
It doesn't have.
It doesn't have.
It doesn't have.
Right. What it does is it generates out of context, enormous amounts of context, it generates probability. And of course, that is how so much of language operates.
It sounds definitionally soulless.
I mean, I think it doesn't have a soul, but that's not its problem.
Right.
Right?
Right. No, but it is its problem if it's trying to, it is not just going way past the Turing test, right? If it's trying to, or if its human godfathers are trying to make it do everything that humans do but better, it's eventually going to run up against that. I mean, it's sort of a...
I think that I think as the technology becomes more and more powerful, the gap between the non-human and the human is going to be ever more clear. And the simple example, we've talked about this 1,000 times, is, students are now using GPT and other LLMs to do their homework, and teachers are using it to grade the homework. So right. What is the
so the humans can just leave that process.
Exactly.
Entirely.
So there's a transaction of information here that is inimical, or that doesn't even resemble anything like knowledge, right? But there's going to be a pedagogical adaptation where the idea of teaching people how to think again is going to become first and foremost the thing that we need to do. And I think similarly, as the technology advances, we're going to see more and more that gap more clearly. I think it's also going to be transforming our societies. I mean, I'm not saying anything new. Everybody on this stage has been talking about how it's going to revolutionize so many things. Right. I have a small perspective, which is as a writer. So.
Right. Well, it's not that small, because it's about, you do something that has been key to civilization and the advancement of civilization since the Greeks.
Top three, I guess. Top something.
Top something. Top something. And so here's a practical question, like for people who are writers and people who create art and people who create music. Mm-hmm. And you could talk about this. You have a lot of exposure in Hollywood, and you're watching how this is changing.
Everybody's using it. Yeah.
Well,
without talking about it. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. We were joking about this. We're in the who are we kidding phase of LLMs, where everybody's using it, not me, but everybody else is using it, but nobody will admit that they're using it. But the question is how does the profession of writing broadly defined, and we could talk about, and I'd love to hear you on the subject of the future of nonfiction journalism, mm-hmm. But how does writing survive?
I mean, look, I think we've been in a process of sort of cognitive decay for 15 years. And I think that the automated...
Thank you for coming, everybody. Enjoy your snacks.
The processes of automated cognition have been at the center of an evolving way of living and being in our society for 15 years.
Well, what's a good quotidian example of cognitive decay in our everyday lives?
I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, we can't... You're watching pandas at night rather than reading the books you're supposed to read on your night.
He's telling you something that's private between us. I was explaining that I have a large stack of books that some I want to read, some I have to read, but sometimes I find myself on Instagram. Instagram knows that I like videos of pandas falling out of swings. It's like I'm a very wholesome furry. I don't know. I don't know what that is. But Instagram, there's thousands of the video. The pandas are very funny. But I'm like, that's cognitive decay.
Well,
I was thinking more like, nobody knows how to read a map anymore because you don't have to.
Sure, there's that, and there's diminished capacity to, and we're seeing this politically, we're seeing this socially, the inability to brook contradiction. We're seeing the inability and unwillingness to sustain concentration over long periods of time. It means a collapse of deep reading. We have students who are coming to college who've never read a book. I mean, the examples are so legion, and all of our lives, and this is not an indictment because I participate, I'm part of this. You know, that's what we are becoming. Now, we're getting some benefits, you know, like toilet paper delivered to our house by a drone or whatever it may be. We're getting great stuff in compensation for that.
And as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of America's founding, we have reached what the founders have wanted, toilet paper delivered by drone. Yeah.
But we may also have other amazing things that happen in our lives and in our societies, but we are seeing an erosion of the classical humanist sort of values that were at the center of whatever this political project
Why
was.
are you so sanguine about this, given that you're diagnosing rather acutely, and I'm accusing you of being sanguine.
You are, yeah.
I mean, and you might deny that, but
No,
I've always felt that in our conversations, you are very, very mellow about the civilizational cognitive decay that you are acutely analyzing. So I'm just always curious. Maybe it's just some personality.
You know, I just feel like, you know, there's a wonderful Austrian writer, Robert Musil, who said you can't despise your own times without doing damage to yourself. And I really believe that. I feel like curiosity about the world that is coming into being, young people, what they're dealing with, they have hope in their lives. I mean, they may be despairing about the planet and all, but they still want to fall in love, and they still want to, you know, and Gramsci has that great quote about pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. And I think those two things can coexist.
Yeah, but why do I feel then, to borrow from the great California philosopher Clint Eastwood, get off my lawn? You know, I don't want this to happen. And is that just a function?
I've been confused by that, your attitude about
you
all
have?
that. Yeah, because you're at the epicenter of a project, a journalistic project.
Yeah, but I edited a magazine that's founded in the humanist tradition. Yeah. I mean, we know who founded the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And I don't think Ralph Waldo Emerson would come back today and go, oh, this AI looks great. Oh, you know.
Well, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
And I think Emerson would come back, and I think Emerson would not recognize the validity of a lot of what we take as being important. I think Emerson would be confused that we don't talk about the soul. And I think Emerson's great contribution was a technology of thinking about the soul that was, I think, what he believed deeply American and deeply new in the world.
When do you think we stopped thinking about the soul or talking about the soul?
I mean,
in a relevant way.
I don't know, but, you know, the Enlightenment had something to do with it, and it continued in America and, you know, it does continue in some religious circles, you know, some attempt to articulate. And I think a lot of what's happening politically is a kind of regressive, reactionary attempt to reassert a dominant narrative, because there is a feeling that the directionlessness of our society, in a sense, is because we don't have that anymore. You know, I don't think the Catholics have an answer to the question, Catholics may be asking a question that
People
we
are
don't
asking a
ask.
question.
Right, at least they're asking a question.
Right.
And I think many times we're not asking the question anymore. But what I'd like to say about that is that I think AI is going to kind of force us to ask the question.
Well, how?
Well, because it's
it
gonna
seems like the AI, the people who are building our technological future don't seem very soul-focused. They seem very profit-focused.
I mean, as de Tocqueville said, it was ever thus in America, making of money is the primary expression of will in this country. But I think that the experience of the technology, as I said earlier, is going to make it abundantly clear that but it's going to take time, and there's going to be a lot of pain along the way, that there is a difference between the machine and what we are. And I think we've been about 100, 150 years into a metaphor about ourselves as mechanisms and machines that we're going to realize is not actually true. It's not that helpful anymore to be thinking about us as just bodies that are like machines. Because there's something different about us and this thing that we're creating. Even if it's very powerful, even if it's an incredibly effective tool, which I believe it will be.
Right. To answer your question about why I have this sort of get off my lawn Amish response to AI, it just doesn't make any sense to me to build a creature that's higher than you on the food chain. Mm-hmm. Like there's no meeting of leopards in the Serengeti saying, you know, it would be amazing if we could come up with an animal that would eat us. You know, it just doesn't seem particularly natural. And going back to this practical,
that's not exactly what we're doing. It's a sort of,
well, we could be.
Right. We might end up doing that. It might end up being that.
And
but
you're sanguine about it.
I really believe that it is, it's very clear to me, and I could be totally wrong about this, but the more that I use it, the more I recognize its limitations and the ways in which it is a tool and the ways in which it is fundamentally not human. And I prefer the experience of being here with you, and I prefer the experience of, I'm a person of the theater, I love audiences. I don't get that, but it's a great tool. Right. So, and I see that it's not replacing me. It's not good. I don't foresee it replacing me. So,
who in our broad universe does it replace, though? I mean, you talked about the script. Like we've used the Law and Order model. You know, you take 100 episodes of Law and Order. It's a great show, very addictive.
Yeah.
And you put it into an LLM, and it'll come out with a 101st script. That's pretty good. It's learned from the thing. So, I mean, this is part of my flawed Serengeti analogy. It's like, why would we make something that would deprive human beings of the capacity to have meaning and work in their lives, meaning the people who write Law and Order currently? That doesn't make any sense from, not even a Luddite perspective, but from a kind of humanist, like, why would I do that? But where, and I guess this comes back to the original question. It's like, when does it get better than a replacement Law and Order?
I was talking to Kara Swisher about this, and Kara said something really, I thought, just really amazing, which was that she felt like we were in a pre-Cambrian explosion moment. And I didn't know what the Cambrian explosion was, so I looked it up. Not on an LLM. And Cambrian explosion is that moment in the fossil record when all complex life comes into being. And so basically what she was saying is that what's ahead is stuff that we can't even begin to imagine, the sort of interface between this advanced intelligence / technology, the machine, and ourselves, and the kinds of new social forms of being and experience that are going to come with it. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of change. Is it the end of the world that Law and Order is going to be also written by AI? I don't know. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Law and Order, but
maybe you should.
Maybe.
Well, let me ask you this. And you're somebody who thinks about, you write in direct reference to an audience, a theoretical audience when you start, and then real audiences that you're performing in front of, testing in front of.
Yeah.
Do you think audiences are going to mind finding out that television shows, movies, even plays are written by AI, or do you think we're just going to enter?
I mean, again, we're so deep into that process.
Yeah.
The data has been driving decision making at development and greenlight, and at the streamers and at the studios for 15 years. Creatives have been losing their jobs to tech people for at least as long. Now I think it's widespread knowledge in Hollywood that if you're a producer and you're pitching any one of the major streamers, all of them are running your pitches through AI. So everybody's trying to game and use the AI to figure out how to hit parameters. There's a general soporific, there's a kind of slurring effect that's happening within dramatic content and comedic content that is widespread. And it's something that didn't just start 2 years ago. It's been going on for a while. So I have to meet that audience. And I have to know that that audience, whose cognition is being decayed through this process, still has a yearning for something. So I have to find my way to that, which means I have to be part of the world that we're in.
Right. Tell us the story of how you used LLMs to write McNeal, a play partially about LLMs.
Yeah.
Because it's fascinating and it's also honest. And you're the first writer I know who's come out, writer of note, who's come out and said, look, this is the way I deploy it because it helped me understand what I'm writing.
Yeah. So I had had that experience in April of 23 with the script in Hollywood, and I was like, wow, the writing is, I actually called Daniel right afterwards. I said, we got 3 years left, which I don't think is actually true. I think we have a little bit longer. But I think, so I started thinking about a play in which the author dies, and the author who dies is an author apparently everybody wants to kill anyway, a white toxic male from the tradition. So I created this character who was himself a composite of Mailer and Roth and a bunch of other sort of, big swinging, authors of a certain generation. And
they know the term.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Fine. It's okay.
And so
the FCC does not control what we say on this stage.
I'm looking forward to your conversation with Letterman. Yeah. And I wanted the play to fundamentally be revealed in the end as a product of a process of compositing and theft that all the great artists and authors have always done. I mean, the play begins with a speech about Shakespeare stealing 70% of the words for King Lear from another play called King Lear that he had performed in 20 years earlier as a younger man. And this is a well-documented that it's a wholesale theft. I mean, in a manner of speaking. It's how Shakespeare wrote everything on some level. So using that notion of theft, borrowing, creativity, originality as the basis, I wanted the play itself to be thieving and stealing and ultimately be revealed as a product of an artificial intelligence. So I was working constantly with it to try to figure out how it was operating. And you showed up for an interview that you did with me. You had asked Claude to write a play in my style, and it was terrible. So I couldn't get it to do anything good, but getting it to work and seeing it do that. In the end, I was, after many, many, many weeks of playing, I was able to get it to write the final 2 lines of a speech that ends the play, which felt very apposite. So it was, it was inspired by an LLM, and it was inspired to depict the creativity of the machine vis-a-vis the creativity of the human, but I was not able to get it to write the play.
Right.
If I had been able to, that might have been interesting, but it wasn't able to do that yet.
Right. And again, unless LLMs could have actual human experience, it doesn't seem, this is what I'm taking.
Or unless the audience doesn't care as much.
What do you mean?
Well, we're being trained on a certain kind of product. So if the audience starts to tack more and more to the slurry, to the gruel that we're being trained to pay attention to, and if we are more and more sensitive to the fast-thinking pleasures of clickbait media, as opposed to the slow-thinking pleasures of, more complex entertainment, you don't have to go back to Shakespeare, even The Sopranos, then I think we're going to start seeing some kind of modulation on both sides. And so LLMs might be able to hit that mark, as you said, with Law and Order, for example. Deep engagement of a certain nature where the objectives are very clearly laid out, where there's a clear genre. All of that, AI can do that.
Right. So if you went to Netflix right now with one of your complicated, idiosyncratic plays instead, or a screenplay, you don't think that it would make it through the LLM digestive tract? I
love you, but you don't work in Hollywood, so
no.
No. I mean, there's no interest in that. But you know, I have a wonderful sort of director, screenwriter friend who talks about how what's happened in mass entertainment is that there's been a sort of inability to understand human motivation at the developmental levels and executive levels. Like, you can't have complex conversations about human motivation anymore within a story. Everything is either sex, or it's money, or it's power, or it's a revenge. That's it. There are no baseline motivations that executives recognize outside of those. But again, that's been something that's been happening for some time. I think the AI is exacerbating. I think the data is exacerbating it. And again, I think there's going to be an adaptation, because at some point, the desire for something new and interesting is actually going to be resurgent, or is at least going to make itself known.
Well, that was my last question for you. And by the way, I'll tell you the story one day about, I did write a screenplay for Jerry Bruckheimer, who bought it and said that the rule is keep it real and keep it smart, and then they didn't make it because they had to make a movie instead about a kangaroo that steals a mobster's money and hops across Australia. And I was like, well, keep it real, keep it smart. By the way, that movie made $100 million, so who am I to like,
exactly.
Who am I to like,
exactly.
But that's the last question I wanted to ask you, which is like, do you think we're just like everything else in some kind of dialectic where there will be a resurgence of a desire to read books in the Moby Dick style?
No.
No?
Not in the Moby Dick
I was hoping you would answer like positively.
No, but not in the Moby Dick style. There will be a resurgence. I don't know what it's going to, and how it will express itself.
Right.
I mean, I think Moby Dick's going to be hard to read for people who haven't never read a book.
Let me rephrase the question. Can you reverse cognitive decay?
I'm trying every day.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Listen, I can do this all day with Ayoade. I can't, however, because we have to keep your attention. We have to grip your attention. But I wanted to thank Ayoade very much for coming out and doing this with us.